some organizations have no problem finding volunteers. For example, a few years ago, NFL Draft comes to Nashville, Tennessee, and like people flocked to volunteers. Yeah, I will definitely go work 12 hours a day if I can actually attend the draft. That's not an issue for things like that. With the church, a little bit different because we're not just talking about like a one-off event. And it, they're not handing out free tickets to a game or something for that. What are some of the main reasons that people don't volunteer?
Yeah, I would say it is time, fear, and sometimes just a lack of awareness of the need that's there in the church. So many people just have calendars that are way too full. And as ministry leaders, we have to realize they're working 60 plus hours a week. They're raising kids. They're trying to be involved in the kids' extracurricular activities. They're trying to date their spouse. And then they're trying to squeeze every last second and minute for their own leisure, for their own recreation. And so volunteering is sometimes just something that's on the back burner. And so sometimes we can call it misplaced priorities, but as ministry leaders, we just simply need to realize that they're very busy. And that's one of the reasons they don't volunteer. It's also fear. Sometimes it's not knowing if they're equipped or if they're gifted enough to be working with kids or students or families. And so it's our job as ministry leaders to help them recognize their gifts, but also equip them for the areas that they might be fearful of, so that, and when it comes time for them to serve, they know exactly what's expected of them and they feel prepared for it. And then the last one, reason they don't volunteer, unfortunately, is we don't always do the best job of communicating needs. Sometimes in the church, we don't get outside of our ministry areas enough to go meet people who are maybe other parts of the church. We stay in the children's ministry or student ministry area, and we don't get out and meet other people to let them know, one, most importantly, the good things that God is doing in our ministry area, but two, the opportunities and the needs that are in our area.
Well, I want to throw something at you that's just something I've seen, something I've experienced. I've seen many volunteers fizzle out very quickly because rather than being used according to their strengths and gifts, they were plugged into an immediate need that was outside their comfort zone and just kept there. Like, for example, I've seen people who don't like kids being put in nursery ministry because we need somebody, and then 6 months later, they're still there. And I've seen some people being taken out of, the normal worship service, put in a ministry, and before you know it, they're volunteering during like the Sunday school or connection group hour, then they're having to volunteer during the worship service. They're not being fed or discipled either, and they don't feel like they fit, and they kind of fizzle out. Or it could be taking an introvert and putting them in the most extroverted ministry out there. How can the church begin to use people according to their strengths rather than just throwing them in a place where there's a need?
Yeah, that's a great question, and unfortunately a big problem. I think it starts with just identifying their gifts. And a simple way to do that is asking them to take a spiritual gifts inventory. Provide that as a church. And then also, one of the things we can do to be helpful is actually identify the roles, the serving roles in our church, and categorize those by spiritual gifts, so that someone who has the gift of administration doesn't find themselves in a room of toddlers where their gifts are not being used, and that's going to lead to burnout, but also they find themselves in a really fearful, panicked situation because they didn't want to be there in the first place, nor were they gifted by God or equipped to be there. And so sometimes we just need to give them a clear way to identify what gifts they have, and then give them a very clear description of the roles we have so that they know where they might find the most joy in serving. Other times, there are people, and I've had them come, and they've just been real honest of, I don't know what my gifts are, and I don't know where, just put me where you need me. And oftentimes, those are the people that end up where they don't want to be. And so I think it's fine to tell people, hey, you might find where your gifts are or where you have joy in serving just by serving. But give them a time frame. Let them know, hey, in a month, 2 months, 6 months, or a year, I'm going to come back and we're going to reevaluate. And if this isn't the best fit, we'll find something different for you. I would rather spend time with them, listening to their feedback and hearing for cues that a change might be necessary rather than having to replace them down the road. And so I think it's important that we identify what gifts they have. If they're still kind of open to serving anywhere, put them where they're needed most, but have a specific time frame where we check with them, we ask them how it's going, and we make a change if it's necessary.
Well, I'm going to ask you an uncomfortable question here, but I think it's something that people deal with all the time. you have people in the church or people anywhere that when you ask them to volunteer, they're just going to feel obligated to say yes, even when they don't feel like it. You have other people that are just going to say no automatically. As a church member, as a lay person in the church, how do I know when I need to stretch myself in something that might not feel comfortable, or how do I know when I need to go ahead and say no because that really is outside my wheelhouse?
Yeah, I think every disciple of Jesus is called to make disciples of Jesus. And so if there's a need in the church, we're called to step in and fill that need. So first and foremost, I would encourage that person to stretch themselves, to say yes when an opportunity comes up, even if they don't feel gifted or equipped for it. Because it may be that they step into a world where they didn't know that they had gifts, but man, their gifts come to flourish. Or maybe it's just that meeting a need for a season in the church is a way that God strengthens their faith and strengthens their awareness of what He's doing beyond where their gifts normally would be used. I think it's important for us to say yes, right, as often as we can, because I think that we'll get into places where we see God moving, and that's what's most important. And then maybe we'll find joy in serving that we didn't know before.